listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
It's a food day on the podcast, which is always super fun. It is an Erin's recipe card, and y'all are going to love this one. I hope you all have your comfort pants on because we are talking about comfort food today.
My pants literally say eatin' pants, like down the leg.
I think during the pandemic, everyone converted to comfort pants. We may never go back to the non-elastic waist in this country.
And why should we, honestly?
I know. I agree.
All right, Erin, take it away before we keep talking about comfort pants.
So I feel that midwinter is always a good time to stop and really dig into comfort food. It is the time of year that is made for comfort food. And this time of history is made for comfort food. So rather than try and have us all do the same thing, I thought it's better, let's just open it up to the broad scope of what comfort food looks like. And let's talk about that. What makes something a comfort food? Is it just like fond emotional remembrances? Is that a key element of it? Is it the fact that it's, I don't know, especially decadent? What do you think makes something a comfort food?
Carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates? Okay. Once we do this, are we able to then agree that these are key components? Because that one fits my comfort food that I'm going to talk about. Carbohydrates, yes.
It's got to be hot.
Hot. Yep, I agree with that one.
Okay. Yes. That word.
Especially if it's a winter comfort food. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not low fat. Let's just get that out there. So hot fat carbs.
Yes. All the things you should not eat.
Yes.
Should also.
Yes.
There's your episode title, Sarah.
I was going to say that. Everyone's going to want to listen to this when I call it hot fat carbs.
Right.
Carbs.
Yeah, and you know what? At this point, we've gotten through January, so maybe we're doing a little bit of a reset after the excesses of December. But now it's February, and
I'm so glad
again.
I'm so glad you just mentioned that because I have been so good all January. And then you're like, we're doing comfort food. And I was like, well, there goes the 5 pounds I lost with sheer discipline. But I needed this. I really did.
And that's the other thing. Comfort food, I think it's an indulgence. So not every day needs or perhaps should be, especially if we define our comfort food as hot fat carbs. Not every day should be comfort food day. It's an indulgence that you have, a periodic thing. So, okay, you were very disciplined in January. Now you have a special day of comfort food. That's not going to set you back 5 pounds. It is not. It does, you can't eat 5 pounds of food for one. I'm like that. That is an enormous quantity. You don't have any idea.
Rachel, I've tried. It's not possible.
Okay, I will let you know tomorrow what the damage is. Because I'm on my way.
I know, but even so, a lot of that's going to be water. And so once you give it another day, that's going to just pass right back out again, and it's going to be okay. So it's one day, it's comfort food, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Delicious.
Yeah. So I decided that I wanted to talk about a recipe I have been making for more than 20 years. It is a beloved one. I keep it. I have it in the freezer almost all the time so that I can just pull it out anytime I need that little special treat. It is red beans and rice.
Mm.
And I honestly, it's delicious. I'm not sure why, because when I was growing up in my elementary school years, my family lived in New Orleans. And it's interesting that I've like created since then. Honestly, it's been since then that I've created this. I've placed so much emphasis on the fact that I had my elementary school years in New Orleans. And I think maybe that's because I'm actually just now processing this as I'm telling you guys this. I think maybe it's because my family then proceeded to move so much after that. Like after we left New Orleans, that was in 6th grade. And then we had move after move after move for years in a row. And so then I started having that situation that even now today, I have a hard time when people are like, where are you from? I should totally, at this point, I should just be rattling off, I'm from St. Louis. I have lived here now for 15 years. Why? More than 15 years. Why do I not just rattle off, I'm from St. Louis? I don't know, but I think it's because all of that early time, I was like, I don't know where I'm from. I'm not really from anywhere. And that has stuck with me. But the New Orleans is sort of the early part of my childhood memories that I can remember distinctly. I have a few things that I can remember from before New Orleans when I was 4 years old and younger. But New Orleans, I have a clear picture of. My mom did not make red beans and rice. That was not part of my childhood. And yet I have like latched onto it as like, this is one of my great comfort foods. I'm from New Orleans. I love it. I didn't grow up eating this stuff. This is not
Tastes like stability.
Oh my gosh. But I guess I sort of created this bit of history for myself out of wishfulness, maybe. Desire to reclaim my childhood and make it even more firm as to what I grew up with, perhaps. But anyway, red beans and rice.
So what's your recipe?
It is from my beloved Joy of Cooking.
Ooh, a classic.
It is a classic. And at some point, I need to find a way that I can get somebody to like take this book that is completely falling out. It's one of the ones that has like a binding. It's a hardback and it's got a binding, but the binding is just completely, it's all the papers are just loose in it. And I have to just keep track of where they belong in this book. I need to find a way to make it like rebound or put into a spiral notebook or something.
Or find a new copy on eBay.
No.
That'll work too.
Oh,
okay.
It's because it's got all of my notes on it. This is my go-to recipe book of like if I want to know how to cook something, just the basics.
Could Dwayne digitize it for you?
Oh,
maybe.
Fun fact, my mom has that exact same book in her kitchen drawer. I could tell you exactly where it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. But
many people have like through the years. There's been many editions of Joy of Cooking. It is one of the truly great cookbooks out there for people that are wanting to just know how to cook basics. So, red beans and rice. I'm sure that through the years I've actually like read another recipe and been like, "Ooh, that sounds nice. I'll add that to this basic copy." But this is where I store my recipe is in the Joy of Cooking. And I made it while I lived in Japan because I could get all the ingredients there. So again, it was one that it's actually pretty easy to make anywhere. It doesn't need specialty ingredients. I personally love making it with kidney beans as my red beans. I think the more traditional one are going to be the small red beans, but I think kidney beans are prettier and they're just a little bigger, meatier. So anyway, I like to use kidney beans. I've tried it with the red beans too. You have to plan ahead with it because you're making it from dry beans and ideally you're going to soak them overnight the night before so that they start plumping up. And then the next day, you get them going on a pot. So you drain them and then you get going. I also like to plan this often after there's been like a Thanksgiving year where we ended up having a ham or Easter, another one, because I like to use the ham bone. So I will often use that for red beans and rice. So if you have a ham bone, that's always a great thing to include. Pop that in there. But then it uses the classic Cajun trinity, which is celery, celery, onions, and green bell peppers, not carrots. So the traditional French trinity of vegetables that sort of forms the base for all sorts of stuff in French cooking
Your
is
aromatics.
Yes, yeah. So it's going to be the onions, carrots, and celery. So in Cajun cooking, you swap out the carrots for green bell peppers, and it forms a very distinctive. Green peppers have that sort of distinctive taste to them, which is another reason why this is fascinating. That I latched onto this is like, this is going to be the cooking of my childhood, because I hated green peppers as a child. Like, hated them so hard, cooked or raw, either one. They were just the worst. And yet here funny. I've decided that, this is the cooking
They're
of my
crucial
child.
to your
Exactly. To my identity. So you put in a whole bunch of chopped vegetables, and then you also add lots of garlic, bay leaves, thyme, oregano, lots of ground pepper, and some red pepper. And then you just let it cook for a long time. It's just one that you leave simmering on the stove until the beans are finally soft. Now, this one is not in the joy of cooking. This I know I read from another recipe and thought it sounded like a good idea. So typically, red beans and rice, like whenever I've seen it on like online recipes and stuff and seen pictures of it, got the beans and they're all very clear, and then there's like the sauce and it soaks into the rice when you serve it. But I like a saucier red beans and rice. And so at some point I read a trick and I thought, oh, that sounds great. And the trick is this. Once the beans are cooked, you take a potato masher and you mash some of the beans so that they then like form a thicker sauce with the liquid. And so it's not as juicy with distinct beans and then a juicy sauce. Instead, it gets to be a thicker, creamier sauce. Don't crush all the beans because you want the pretty beans in there. But it makes for a thicker, creamier sauce. It does make it less visually appealing. So I'm not going to be the one having my recipe on the cover of this podcast if you're looking at it, because it's delicious, but it is not a beautiful comfort food. So we'll go with one of the rest of you as our cover shot for this episode. But then the final thing that you need to do is some sausage. So slice up some sausage. You could totally make this vegetarian if you need to. Leave out the ham and don't put in the sausage. But for true comfort food, you want to add in the sausage. And so it could be just plain old kielbasa or some sort of neutral bratwurst, or you can go with like Cajun andouille sausage of some sort and slice that up in there. So delicious. Freeze it in a Ziploc bag in individual portions or family-sized portions. It freezes beautifully, reheats without any trouble at all. Serve it over rice. And honestly, you can freeze rice too. And so if you're going to make up a batch of rice and you are a single person, might as well make up a whole batch and then freeze up rice, because rice also reheats well if you need to. This is anathema to all of our Asian listeners, so I'm sorry. But
my mouth is pursed right now. Like, why would you do that? I'm not Asian,
so
but
there are times when you want to have fresh rice, without a doubt. But to put the red beans on top of it, the rice does not need to be freshly made. It needs to be heated up, yes. But there's no magic about it being freshly made. So if you want, you can actually freeze the rice and make it even that much easier for you when you come home and you're like, oh, it's an awful day. Just pull it out of the freezer and you're ready to eat a delicious supper really quickly.
Is there a particular type of rice that you prefer? Does it matter? Is this like
Honestly,
a standard?
with all kinds of rice. Well, not all kinds, but yeah, long grain rice, short grain rice, brown rice. I have not had it with wild rice, which isn't even rice, but yeah,
It's not.
that's it's grass. It's a different plant. But yeah, the rice itself, all of those are delicious. Like
Cool.
when I lived in Japan, I was using Japanese rice tends to be fairly short grain rice, and it tends to be fairly sticky. And it was delicious with that. And I've
really
since also
good.
had it with like a jasmine rice or a basmati rice, and that is a long grain rice, and it tends to be very fluffy and it much more individual grains. Also delicious. So and indeed the brown rice also fantastic. So the rice itself is really just the thing that allows it really amps up the carb factor for our recipe, key component of the comfort food, and it balances out the flavor of what you're eating, because the red beans is fairly intensely flavored, and so the rice helps it not be. It would be too much to try and eat this as like a soup or something. That's not a good. It's too powerful for that.
So the emphasis is really on the beans portion of this.
It is. Red beans and rice. It's a whole medley though. Like it's the beans, they take on I don't know.
I'm so hungry right now.
It's great. It's totally worth it. I have through the years I've tried, I'm like, why couldn't this be a delicious like a bean dip? Red beans and rice bean dip. It doesn't work. It's too powerful. It needs the rice. To have rice mixed into the bean dip is weird. Some things you can do that. I've been able to convert certain things to be a delicious dip, but red beans and rice needs to, it's its own thing, standalone. It's my comfort food. Making it for 20 years, and I'll make it for another 20 and be happy.
Just tell people if you're from New Orleans, because that's who you are.
I know. Yes. I should.
Sounds delicious.
You got Mirepoix coursing through your veins. And that's okay.
I hear you. I love it when people ask, where are you from? And you're like, you mean, where was I born? Where do I live now? I mean, this you're going to have to be more specific here.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to tell you where I'm from. I'm from Flavortown. And here's
Flavortown?
I'm from Flavortown. I'm about ready to tell you why.
Let's hear it.
Do it.
I was going to present a recipe today for beef stroganoff, which is just warm and delicious, and I can feel it warming in my belly right now. And in fact, we're making it later this week, which makes me excited. But here's the kicker. I was in the car with my husband earlier this afternoon, and we got to talking about falafel and meatballs, and then ultimately, for a completely unrelated reason to this podcast, we landed on the topic of meatloaf.
Oh.
Yes.
And one of the things that we talked about was it's not for everybody. A lot of people are dissidents of meatloaf. And personally, I think it's...
You are right, and I don't know what... It is strange to me, but you're right.
I think it's the name. Ultimately, I think that's what it's called, honestly. Because let me tell you what, if you are anti-meatloaf and you ate my meatloaf, you would be unabashedly pro-meatloaf after this point.
But meatloaf is highly subjective. I don't know any two women who make the same meatloaf recipe. And I've stopped making it as much lately. I used to make it every couple of weeks or so until my children confessed to me that they really liked grandma's meatloaf better than mine.
Oh my.
And I was like, that's okay. You're allowed. I mean, she's my mom. It's fine. I'm a big girl. I can handle it, but maybe I won't make it for a while. Because even though I learned to make meatloaf from this woman, I make it differently than she does. Yep. And so no two meatloaf recipes are the same. And maybe you had one that was kind of nasty and it made you, prejudiced against the whole category. But no, it's a good food.
Yeah.
And very Actually, hot fat carbs, definitely.
Yes, totally. So
Yeah.
I will give you the rundown of what goes into my meatloaf. I think mine is basically just like a giant Italian meatball that's like formed into meatloaf form. So I take ground beef. Fat content isn't usually that important. I try to do like 80-20 or higher, like less fat content than that. I use Italian breadcrumbs. So they're already seasoned. You don't have to worry about adding extra herbs and spices necessarily, although you can. I probably will put some salt and black pepper in there, and then a couple of eggs and maybe a splash of milk, and you just mix it up until it forms together, because you're really not going to get any. And I've tried to do it without breadcrumbs, but it will not work. It will not stick together.
No.
It needs that binder of breadcrumbs. So you tell yourself, okay, it's comfort food, hot fat carbs. I'm doing it. I'm going all in. Sometimes I also add like a cream soup of like a condensed can of creamed soup of some kind. Onions, celery. I think that's one of the other beautiful things about meatloaf too, is like it's completely and utterly customizable.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get a product that you can shape into a loaf and bake, like it's your own recipe. Like you could probably use ground pork or ground turkey or ground veal or some combination of those. I know some people put ketchup on their meatloaf. I
do ketchup.
advise not doing that, but
I put ketchup in my meatloaf.
Yes,
really?
I grew up doing that.
Uh-huh.
Ketchup in the meatloaf. Yep.
So there's that. I know that like people may put like barbecue sauce in there. It's a little less Italian. I don't know. I like a more American maybe. I don't know. I don't know how to differentiate between the two. But like there are a lot of different ways that you can make it. So after you've shaped it and you've already presumably preheated your oven to anywhere between 350 and 400 degrees, you bake that sucker for 45 minutes or whatever, maybe an hour, until it comes to 160 degrees right through the middle, because you don't want to get trichinosis. And then you take it out, it's all like brown and caramelized and like greasy, and you serve it up with mashed potatoes, of course, maybe some peas if you want to eat some kind of vegetable nutrition in your supper. And you are good to go, fam. Like, and then here's the other kicker too, is perfect leftovers. You ever eat a meatloaf sandwich, people? It is the best. Like leftover meatloaf sandwiches are the bomb.
With some Swiss cheese.
I don't go that route, but if you wanted to do that, that's fine.
Cheese on everything, man.
I just put like a little like thin layer of mayonnaise on my Wonder Bread, smash some meatloaf on there, put your top bread on, you're good to go.
And every time you make meatloaf, you are sort of paying tribute to the economical housewives who have come before you, because, this is a dish that was invented to make meat stretch further. That, you get 1 pound of beef and you've got to feed 8 people. And well, let's take yesterday's bread and, turn it into breadcrumbs, mix it in. And suddenly you've got double the, mass of a meat product and everyone's happy. So it's a wonderful way to stretch meat a little bit further and get just that wonderful meaty flavor go all the way around the table.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to chime in, as I often do, talking about cooking for one. Meatloaf is totally doable cooking for one, and also freezes well. And so you just make a little make up your whole batch, but then just divvy it up into portions. You don't necessarily have to commit yourself to eating the entire, 2-pound loaf at once. Just make it all up and then reform it, put it into like little sandwich baggy things so that it can freeze nicely. pop them back
in a
in the
muffin tin,
freezer.
right?
And then, you can just make them back up individually. You don't even need to freeze. You don't need to cook them.
Oh,
Put
okay.
them back in the freezer raw.
Yeah.
And then pull them out and cook them. Once you are ready, you can thaw them first and then pop it in the oven, or just wait a little longer while it thaws in the oven.
Oh, I love that. An individual mini meatloaf. And then you get both ends, because the ends are the best part.
Best part. Yeah.
Yep.
It actually ends up being much more like a very large meatball, but that is satisfying as all get
My
out.
art reaction all the way around.
So,
When I was growing up, we would put, well, when I would cook it, honey or molasses, because my grandpa used to put molasses in his spaghetti, and that was like a mind-blowing thing that makes spaghetti amazing.
Really?
Yes, molasses in spaghetti. So I would put some sort of sweetener in meatloaf and ketchup. I would always put ketchup in my meatloaf. Meatloaf hasn't been a thing for me for a long time, because it's a whole list of things that I mean, breadcrumbs are like a no-go. But as you were talking about this, I started thinking, duh, I have almond flour and I can do eggs. So now I'm really curious about experimenting with my own meatloaf, because this is a curious new thing that I never even considered, making a meatloaf. And now I want to.
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure I can. I
Try it.
can't do ketchup, but yeah.
Can you eat rice?
No.
Oh, dang it.
I can eat peas, though. I'll have peas with my meatloaf.
there you go.
And sweet potatoes. There you go. Oh, man. I got to do that now.
I'm so hungry.
Report back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, tell us what you do for comfort food. You do have different restrictions, and so you have to be creative. What do you do?
So comfort food isn't really a thing for me anymore. And I don't want to be like the Debbie Downer of this entire episode.
Wow.
So pre-diagnosis, I would have to say that pizza was my comfort food, because we wouldn't have it that often. And even growing up, I think it was my comfort food, because we would get it occasionally, and it was always the thing that I loved. When we first moved to St. Louis, there was, and now I'm not going to remember the name, but there was a pizza place that you would go buy the pizza uncooked, and then you'd bring it home and throw it in your own oven. Papa Murphy's.
Oh, I love that.
And we lived within walking distance of one. So when we really needed a comfort dinner, we would order this extra large Papa Murphy's and walk over, and then literally walk home with this like 28-inch pizza across a really busy street. And people are like, "What are you doing with this gigantic pizza?" But it was, but like pizza and pizza is like the one thing that I seriously miss being able to eat, and there's no substitution. Don't try to tell me to make carrot sauce, because I won't. No. You can't substitute for pizza. Yep. So I think pizza is like my comfort food. That counts for hot fat carbs too. The pan pizza from Pizza Hut, probably my number one favorite of like anything.
Yeah.
So
where it just sort of deep fries while it's in the pan.
Just so good. Yeah. So now with my different relationship with food, I've struggled with this, I guess. I don't know if struggle's the right word. Contended with it for a while, because food is such a comforting thing. I mean, we're doing an entire episode on comfort food because when we feel like we need a little like hug in our bellies, we eat something that we love, and that doesn't really work for me because I have a very strict set of things that I can eat. There isn't really this separate category of these are foods that I only eat when I need comfort, because most of them, I mean, carbs are just not really a thing. And it took me a long time to kind of deal with that. So, I mean, sweet potatoes are kind of one of those things, but I eat them regularly anyway, so they're not really special.
Yeah.
The one thing, and I mean, this is an everyday thing, and it's not a carb, so it probably doesn't fit a lot of the boxes that we've already talked about. But coffee is my comfort food. Even though I drink it every day, like if I need a mental pick-me-up, I go AeroPress, my favorite cup of coffee or whatever we tend to have. And it has become what calms me down and what makes me feel happy. It's really simple and not all that exciting, but that is kind of what my life has come to.
Question for you. Do you drink it black?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It depends what it is. I put almond milk in it usually.
Okay. So there you go. You gotta, I mean, there's a little sugar and almond milk and some fat. So we still have our hot fat carbs.
It is still hot. Although earlier I had a cold brew because during the summer, cold brews are my comfort food. Which is true though. I mean, when I go to the store, like if I want a treat, I'll buy, a $3 little cold brew because that is probably the only thing in the store that's like a quote unquote special thing. And then I save it in the fridge for a day when I'm like, oh, I'm going to drink my cold brew now because I want something special.
Yeah.
I love cold brew. It makes my hair stand on end though. So
yeah, it's full of caffeine. Trader Joe's has these little baby nitro brewed cold brews. So they're just so good. And so I save those when I need like a little extra special pick me up because it's a special kind of coffee that I don't actually drink every day.
My husband is a self-proclaimed coffee snob.
Yes.
And like being with him for 10 plus years, I've learned that it's not just like Folgers crystals and a drip coffee machine, and the only thing that you get to pick between is cream, sugar, or both. Like,
no,
coffee is an adventure, and I don't think people like. I don't think that like people give it enough credit necessarily.
I mean, we have an AeroPress, we have a pour over, we have a French press, we have a drip coffee maker. I think that's everything we have. AeroPress is my favorite way, especially if I need 1 cup. It's super fast. You just boil your water, put your grounds in the little container thingy and pour the water over it and smush it down and you have coffee like in 5 minutes. It's amazing. And it's the best way to test any coffee. Like if you have a new one and you really want to know what the flavor profile is, you just AeroPress it because it gives you like the cleanest, most pure taste of the coffee. And it tastes totally different than if you were to pour over. Ethiopian is my favorite single origin. By like hands down. I also love Jamaican Blue Mountain. It's really expensive, but it's so good.
We have very similar coffee taste, it turns out.
Yes, we do. I like the rich ones that kind of have the chocolatey flavors. Sometimes I'll do the acidic ones, but they're not really my favorite. I don't really like dark roasts. I like the medium lighter roasts that give you all of the rich chocolatey notes instead of the
more caffeine.
Yes, and more caffeine. Although I realized the other day when I was sick, so I had COVID, which is why my voice is still really weird. But my heart rate was this, and this might not, don't take this as medical advice. My heart rate was like not where it should be because I was sick and I was like anxious. And I didn't really want coffee, but I went and made myself a cup and I started drinking it and my heart rate calmed down. And I was like, oh, coffee made me feel better. That might not be very healthy, but it worked.
No criticism here.
Do what you got to do, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So coffee is, I may be a little bit too attached to it because it's the only thing I have, but I give it a nice warm hug every day. Oh, and sorry, I forgot about this part. The mug plays such a part in this too. And maybe this is what makes it even more of a comfort thing. I have a large selection of mugs on purpose. But, you know, there's a different mug for every different feel. And I have my favorite mug that's like the really heavy diner one that just is like, it just hugs my hand and it's a wonderful thing. Or you have the really gigantic mug for when you need a big cup. Or you have the little mug that your friend gave you, so you're thinking about your friend while you're drinking your coffee. Like there's a mug for every situation.
I'm gonna get you a giant
part of the experience.
Ceramic mixing bowl with a handle. Be like, here's your coffee cup.
My husband did that. He got himself one of those like 1970s era soup mugs with the handle on the side. And he uses that for a coffee cup, and he gets disgruntled with me when after I put the dishes away, I put it in with cereal bowls. He says, that is a mug. I had a bit of a challenge with the comfort food thing because I share a house with a lot of small people. And so like I often do, you know, if I'm going to make a big pot of something, I wanted to ask them, you know, what are your comfort foods? And I found out that comfort foods are highly, highly subjective. Because we ended up with a list of very different comfort foods. So, for example, one of my daughters, it's lasagna. Another of my daughters hates pasta. For my son, it's a hamburger beef stew. Another of my children will not eat potatoes. So it's... But we decided to roll with it and just make it into a big adventure. And so we have down on our whiteboard right now a list of comfort foods for everybody in the family. And we decided we would have a comfort food cooking masterclass where each child got to learn to make their own favorite comfort food.
I love this.
So that when they leave the home, and for some of them, it's not too far in the future, they can go out equipped with at least how to make the food that will make them feel comforted. So I've been cooking literally all day, except for when I was running to the store to get the ingredients we needed for this. So we did lasagna with the oven-ready noodles because I'm not a complete glutton for punishment.
Mm-hmm.
We did the hamburger beef stew, which is one that my mother always makes for my son when he goes to visit grandma. This is a super simple, it's just ground beef, potatoes, carrots, and like seasoned salt. Let cook. It works. But he learned how to, I didn't realize he didn't know how to like peel potatoes and chop carrots and such. So now he does. Woohoo!
Awesome.
Good for you, Mom.
At least one of them had to remember that dessert counts as comfort foods. So child number 3 requested no-bake cookies.
Mm-hmm.
And so we made no-bake cookies together. And child number 4, on the one hand, got really simple. She wanted 3 things. So that's complicated. But those 3 things were macaroni and cheese out of the box, graham crackers with chocolate frosting, and hot cocoa.
We are twin flames.
Yes, you really are. So there, and I had a little taste of everybody's comfort food, so I can vouch for the fact that it is indeed comforting hot fat carbs happening. For me, though, the challenge was, you said comfort foods, and my thought was, well, that's easy, takeout.
Oh,
and I thought, wait.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, my comfort foods are Chinese takeout, Thai takeout, sushi takeout, pretty much in that order.
Pad Thai.
My fallback comfort food is actually a chicken pot pie that I get from my favorite pie maker.
Right.
That I don't make, and I just keep it in my freezer ready to pull out on those nights. But yeah, that is a different category. You're right.
So I had to sort of go past that and think, okay, of the foods that I make for myself, what are the most comforting? Okay. And everything involves rice in some way. Let me explain. Yes. When I was a kid, when Erin, about the time you were in New Orleans, I was in Papua New Guinea. And there were not a whole lot of American foods available to us there. So, like, there was no McDonald's in the entire country back in the 80s. There were 2 choices for if we wanted to go out to eat. If we wanted sort of a fast food, we could go to Big Wusta and get a whole roast chicken and, like, steak fries.
Ooh. Yeah, that sounds
or good. For something a little bit, the other option was the Captain's Table, which was a Chinese restaurant. Over in the Pacific, it's a whole lot, you're much more likely to have, Chinese food than American food because of just how much closer it is. So those were our 2 eating out options. The home options were, my mom tried. Oh my goodness, she tried. But I described to my children one dish in particular that was my least favorite of our Papua New Guinea dishes. And we had it probably once a week. Greens and tin fish. So imagine fill in the blank greens that you cook. I think there was some kale at some point, or like mustard, turnip, whatever greens they had, cooked with bone-in mackerel served to small children.
Delicious.
So I ate a lot of rice during those years. And white rice to this day is just an instant comfort food for me. I can't eat it all the time because it's just not as easily digestible as, say, raw kale. But boy, I do love it very much. So I figured any comfort food dish that I make at home has to probably include white rice. And then I remembered back one of my first jobs was as sort of an idiot apprentice and maid of all work for my neighbor, who was a Thai lady who ran a food truck in the summers that would go around to various, fairs and carnivals and stuff. And so a lot of my basic cooking I picked up just from looking over Anosha's shoulders. And so when I got married, I could make very few things. Like, we're talking tuna fish and macaroni and cheese here. I was not a very good cook. But I could do at least half a dozen different moderately authentic Thai dishes. So that's a kind of cooking and eating that for me goes back a long ways and is very comforting. Now, the dish that I made today was not one that I learned in the food truck, but it was one that I remember having on many date nights with my husband back before restaurants stopped being a thing for us and back before he left. So what I made today...
Back before he deployed. Lest there's any new listeners.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. My husband is deployed. I tell the kids, a ship ate my husband, and I really hope that it will spit him out one of these days. This dish is full of good memories for me. Lots of comfort. It is a peanut chicken curry over rice. If you can call a curry dish ooey-gooey, this one is it. So the recipe that I have modified for this purpose is from foodformyfamily.com, Easy Thai Peanut Chicken Curry. And it is super good. Of course, I modify it. I I add vegetables, for one thing. So the way you do this is you start... this recipe calls for coconut oil, but I've never bought coconut oil in my life. So, really, sorry.
Wow.
You can also use vegetable oil or an oil of your choice. So you're going to get your pan really hot with the oil in it, add your chunks of chicken, brown the chicken. At this point, you're going to have red curry paste and put in about 4 tablespoons. I find half of a 4-ounce container is about right, so that you can get 1 4-ounce container and make 2 batches of this stuff. Saute the chicken for an additional 5 minutes or so, and about halfway through, add your vegetables, which in my case is long green beans and thin sliced red bell pepper.
Now, question, when you say long green beans, are you shopping at an Asian market? So these are long yard long beans?
No, these are just the regular kind. You just snap the ends off, but don't snap them into tiny little pieces.
Okay, I'm with you.
They're just easier to eat with chopsticks if you leave them alone.
Yep.
So you're sauteing everything all together. At the end of that 5 minutes, then you add the rest of your ingredients. So get ready for this. 1 can of coconut milk. 6 tablespoons creamy peanut butter.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
2 tablespoons brown sugar.
Yes.
Yep.
2 tablespoons either fish sauce or soy sauce, or in my case, 2 tablespoons of each.
Hey.
Decadent.
Then red chili paste, I use sambal olek to taste. For me, that was a heaping tablespoon, and this really isn't that spicy, so I think I could probably add a little bit more. And then half a cup of water. I usually use the water to sort of rinse out the coconut milk can. Then stir it all up, simmer together for 10 minutes. Probably not any longer because you really don't want to lose the aromatics from the curry and the peanut butter. And then serve over rice, and it's like eating, if they could make a hot ice cream. It's the emotional equivalent of eating warm ice cream for supper. And
I've carbs right there.
Yep. And it's so easy to do. I can't believe I used to order this dish out at restaurants, and I can't believe how long it took me to actually Google and say, oh my goodness, that recipe is easy, and most of those ingredients I already have in my kitchen. So yeah, if you need some comfort, I know a lot of us are missing our restaurant food, and takeout is great, but sometimes you want to make a restaurant quality dish at home, and this one is definitely within the realm of possibility. So I want to apologize to our listeners if you have heard chewing noises at all during this podcast. It is because I brought a plate upstairs with me, and I'm really having trouble keeping my hands off of it while we record. So
judgment-free
apologies.
You know, for those who are living in places where maybe you haven't eaten much in the way of Thai food before in your life, I am impressed these days with just regular old grocery stores that actually will carry like a Thai curry paste. If you live in a place where you have access to an international grocery store, you get more varieties you can pick from them. Then I often find that they come in a little can instead of in a jar. But even at just an ordinary grocery store, you would be able to attain these ingredients in most places, I'm guessing, just because I can see them all over the place here in the Midwest. So if you haven't tried it before, it would be worth trying, and you should be able to lay your hands on those ingredients fairly easily these days.
This is a great entry-level dish for someone who's interested in trying a curry, because you've got that peanut butter, which sort of, let's be honest, gives it an American appeal. Mm-hmm. And you can leave the spice out altogether. I mean, you've got that little curry flavor, but there's no spice in the curry itself. And any, chili pepper you add to it, that's all on you. You can do it to taste. So if you just want something that tastes warm and peanut buttery, but savory, and it just hits the spot.
Yeah.
I think I've only had curry once in my life, and I did not like it, but I think it was because it was so spicy.
Oh,
I could not handle it.
Levels. And so, if you do find you're inspired to go to the international grocery store, then there it probably will be a spicier curry paste. All the ones I've come across, you might have a little bit more touch and go on that one if you're not confident on your spicy levels. But
do not try to get coconut milk or curry paste at Aldi or another discount grocery store. You will need to at least go to, in my case, it's like Food Lion, But normal grocery stores do have these things. Anyway, I am fat and happy right now.
Wow. Sounds delicious. Sounds amazing. And it is one that I always forget how quickly you can mix up curry. Pretty much as quickly as you can cook the rice, which is ridiculous.
Or start the rice before you start the curry, and about the time you finish the curry, the rice will be popping. I only ever cook rice with a rice cooker because I don't trust myself. I like good rice, and it's just easier to let the machine do it.
Yeah. Oh, well, ladies in the lounge, I would love to hear what some of your favorite comfort food recipes are. And this is the time of year when I'm betting there's a number of us who are like, man, I'm bored of all of my usual repertoire. I've exhausted it. I need something new. So share those recipes and inspire us all to, be really diligent and virtuous during the week so that we can splash out on the weekend with our comfort food recipes. What are your hot fat carb recipes that you wanna offer up to us all? Let's hear them.
Yes, share those recipes with us in our Facebook group. Find us on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge on Facebook. I'm really hungry right now, guys. There's so much good food. I need to go make dinner.
I'm really full right now, so
I've just been drinking coffee this whole time.
Man.
Find all of our podcasts at kfuo.org/Lutheran Ladies Lounge or on your favorite podcasting app. You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm about to go smash some graham crackers with chocolate frosting.
And I'm Rachel.
I ain't lying.
Views and opinions expressed on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast may not represent the official position of the management or ownership of KFUO Radio, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The Lutheran Ladies Lounge is produced by KFUO Radio and available at kfuo.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Join our community on Facebook in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge.